Hello lovely people, my name is Susie Ashworth and I am a pregnancy coach and a business mentor, and I am delighted to be able to introduce to you the lovely Kris Emery, who is here for the Business Braveheart web show this week to talk you all through how to create amazingly compelling copy. Kris Emery is an editor, copy editor, and has, well, started her editing journey around 8 years ago, but is the founder of chrisemery.com, which specifically works with heart-centered solo entrepreneurs who are looking to stand out in the crowd by communicating who they are in a way that feels really authentic and honest to their hearts. So welcome. Thank you very much for joining us, Kris.
Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. Kris, don't be fooled by the Aussie Kiwi twang, because Kris is actually from the UK but has been living across the water for quite some time now. So Kris, do you want to just introduce yourself and tell people how you came to be doing what you're doing?
Sure. So I came to editing sort of through the back door, really. I did foreign languages, being completely not an English literature, English language person at all at school. In fact, English was my worst subject at school. But I loved foreign languages, so I went off and did that at university, and then eventually came on to doing translation and linguistics, which I really loved, pulling language apart and that kind of thing. And it eventually occurred to me that I was quite reasonable at English, despite what I'd thought at school, and that it wasn't all about learning about the books that didn't really appeal to me when I was a teenager. It was much more about the kind of texture of the language and communication, which I'm huge on. So I did all the foreign language stuff, and then went off to London and started my career in corporate reporting, and eventually had enough of the kind of hectic lifestyle of London and thought I would go freelance and location independent, which meant being able to work from wherever I was on the road, doing the same kind of work but on the editing side, where I could be sent things online just through email. And then I realised I didn't have to read boring reports that would gather dust in a drawer somewhere after I'd been editing them, and I could actually really focus on some things that I wanted to be reading day after day and things I thought were important to be putting out there, rather than, you know, never read again once I'd looked at them. So I decided to specialise in things I'm particularly interested in: health, wellness and well-being being, you know, the top ones. Also lifestyle and development businesses, but yeah, huge focus on women in business who want to tell their own story, and that's why they came to do what they wanted to do and tell it their way, so not detracting from their own voice. So yeah, I'm a big believer in voice, in getting like really juicy language, and in making sure it connects to the audience. So yeah, that's where I come from.
I love that, and I love kind of your background of going from corporate reporting into something that felt really comfortable for you, and focusing on kind of the health and wellness area. Lots of the women that will be listening to this today kind of were in corporate jobs or in 9-to-5s. Many of them had children, and then kind of decided that they wanted something more meaningful in their life. And for those who didn't kind of have kids, they just decided they wanted to do something where they helped people. But how do you go from being in a corporate environment 9-to-5, where often it's more normal to want to blend in than to stand out when it comes to the way that you're communicating your message, or the brand that you're representing their message? It's all kind of quite uniform. And I talk a lot about it with my business mentoring clients, about how to really tap into who you are and your story is there an easy way to kind of make that transition from being like that to kind of wanting to give more of yourself?
That's such an interesting question. I don't know that I fit into the corporate box very easily, to be honest. So my own journey was very much like I needed to express myself.
Yeah.
So for me personally, that transition was a very natural one because I had no option but to use my voice. Like, it's what I'm here to do.
Yeah.
The self-expression is a huge, enormous, central part of my business and what I'm all about. So, as I say, personally, I didn't find it too difficult, but my clients can really struggle. And I think what it comes down to is allowing yourself to break the rules that you've always been taught. Of course, getting to know what your message is and getting that clarity, but then also being really free, I think, with the way that you like to express yourself. And sometimes that involves like journaling, doing a lot of personal writing and a lot of getting to know yourself, but also a little bit protecting yourself from what's already out there, because I do read a lot of stuff that becomes very samey, buzzwords, huge in corporate, huge in the public sector, and certainly in the online world where I work, a lot of people cotton onto the same kind of jargon, and it becomes trendy to use certain words, and we don't all have to sound the same. In fact, the more you can really get to know your own language and what you stand for and your own kind of really unique elements, your own the unique parts of your expression, really, the better you'll be able to connect with the audience and also sort of stand out from everybody else who's doing kind of similar stuff out there. There's a lot of noise online.
Yeah.
And it's trying to find that little spark of your own self anyway. Yeah, in addition to that, it's a lot about confidence. So I know that a lot of people come to me not because they aren't good writers. In fact, quite the opposite. Most of my editing clients are amazing writers, and they have a lot to say for themselves, and they've got a great message that they desperately want to be heard. And I don't mean desperate in a kind of needy way. I mean in a, they want to make a difference. They're not here to mess around and play small. They really want to get their message across. And yet at the same time, they're lacking the confidence in their writing and all that kind of thing, because maybe the last time they wrote was in corporate, where it's very structured, or maybe even before that could have been academic.
Yeah.
And I find that having a professional look at it really helps people to gain confidence. Now, for people watching, gaining confidence doesn't necessarily mean hiring a professional editor. Depends on where you're at in your stage of business and how confident you already are. But it could just be sharing it with some friends, getting somebody else to have a look over it, just anything that gives you a bit of a boost. And making sure that you feel really good about putting it out there, because there's no point, we all do it, there's no point in writing something and then hiding it and keeping it like under wraps, because you wrote it for a reason. You put good time and effort into expressing something that people need to know. Like, when you're positioning yourself as an expert on your blog, you're doing so because you know you have that knowledge, and there are people out there who need that information, and they need it delivered in a certain way to really engage with it. Quite a lot of the time, you take for granted what you know, and you don't realize how valuable your message really is. So you definitely need to find a way to bolster your confidence so that you can put yourself out there.
So that's a really kind of great point. And I talk about just taking baby steps And so it doesn't mean that you have to share your work with the whole of the online forum that you are a member of. But should we be saying, does this sound like me? Like when I'm writing my about page, for example, you know, what type of feedback is going to be really helpful to hear or to be asking for?
That's a great question. So for me, it's about testing. When I started writing and started finding my voice, I definitely tested out a lot of different things. And that's not just the way I was speaking, but it's also what I was talking about. I found myself very comfortable in certain things, but I would bore myself even writing it. That's a clue. That's a clue that you're not writing what you're really passionate about and what's really like going to connect with people. If you're really struggling to put it down on paper, then go and do the exact opposite of what you're doing. So talk about something completely different. Get away from the habitual side of like churning out a blog post or whatever, because that's not coming from a passionate, authentic place. Yeah, I think that pretty much would be how I'd answer that question.
Okay, so for somebody who's just starting out in business and hasn't written a blog before, hasn't kind of written any website copy before, where is the best place to start? So we've done a bit of journaling and we're kind of getting more comfortable with kind of putting pen to paper and seeing our words, you know, externally. If you are writing for your website, where's the best place to start?
Oh, okay. So there are loads of great resources out there that are much better than I can verbally tell you what kind of template to follow. But I would really recommend keeping it very simple. The bare bones of a website that you really need, obviously you've got your homepage, your landing page, but you have your about page and how people can work with you, and then you've got your blog. And what I would say is all of the pages of a website have very different functions. Don't try and do everything on every page. Start with, actually, it's the hardest one to write, but if you start with your about page, that's the first point at which people come to know you, and also it's the most looked at page on your website. So you want minimal text on your homepage that just grabs people and has a call to action to feed them through to learning more about you. And then what they'll probably do is either follow the instruction through to perhaps your about page or your work with me page. And on your about page, you're really just trying to gain people's trust and engage with them and make them take the next step to working with you. So you want to make it about them. So you need to know a lot about what they want from you, what questions they're asking in their head about the kind of services that you offer.
Okay.
Okay, so I would say probably start at your about page, because you know your own story the best of anything, and you also know not just your own personal background and why you came to your business, but you also know what you're selling or what you're in business for. So you tell them about it, but you don't sell at that point. That's just a trust, a know, like, and trust factor, if you like. Trying to give a bit of information, but making it relevant to the reader.
So I think that's a really great tip for people to take on board. So although your about page is about you, it shouldn't actually be full of I. And if you're talking about yourself, being able to relate that back to the needs and wants, and desires of your ideal client, your potential customer, is really important. So I started work as a pre and postnatal specialist because I really wanted to serve women like you who needed help around X, Y, and Z. And that's important to me because I love working with people like you. Is that kind of what you mean?
Definitely.
Yeah.
And if you have heard of him, or even if you haven't, definitely go and watch this. Simon Sinek has a really good formula for explaining how to structure any piece of communication, actually, which is all around starting with why. His TED Talk is called Start With Why, as his book, and it's a really excellent way. I always write by this method. Start with what you believe in, then go on to explain how you do it, and then eventually get to the what it is that you're there to tell them about. So starting with why engages them on an emotional level. So once they recognize that they believe the same as you believe, then you've got them on a level that means that they trust you, they recognize that they've got the same values, and they can easily identify whether or not you're the kind of person for them. Because we're all in very personal businesses. People say business isn't personal, but I couldn't disagree more. My business is certainly very personal, and that's because of the type of business I've created. I wanted it to be something that really made me happy, but also helped other people and made a difference to them. So so people are really buying into who you are as a person, so make sure that's coming across. So going back to the original question of where to start, even though it's a toughie, definitely start with your about page, because that's where other people start, and it's also kind of where other things are going to feed off from. So once you know what packages and offerings you're going to make, then you'll want a separate services page or a work with me page, or somewhere where you can outline what you offer. Now, the function of that is not to become trusted or to share your story so that people connect with you. The purpose of your offerings is to very clearly and precisely lay out the what it is that you can do for them to solve their problems. And then each of your offerings could have a separate sales page, which is further persuasion, and that's the real sales copy. That's where you really persuade, and the language has to be a lot more not just engaging, but a lot more compelling to really get them to take action, but the action being to buy your service. So that action could actually be to get onto a free consultation with you, or to actually purchase a downloadable product, or to fill in an application form to use your services, which is in my case. So that sales page has to really make them take action, not just click through.
Okay, so can you fill out for me a little bit what you mean by the language needs to be compelling? Do you have any compelling words or top tips? How do we make that? How do we make that happen?
Okay, so with the about page, I demonstrated how you start with your beliefs and that kind of thing. Yeah. With a sales page, I would recommend really hooking them on the pain points or the pleasure points of what it is that you're offering. So we buy through either pleasure or pain, and I'm not a copywriter, so I don't want to go too much into the marketing side of things because it's not my exact speciality. But from a language point of view, what we do is use what's called a hook. And there are several different types of hook to make people keep reading. Now, my favorite one is the question. So you might ask a question that people that that reader is going to identify with. So you've figured out all of the pain points that they have in their life, and you, or not generally in their life, but in relation to what you can do for them, and using their exact language. So using the kinds of stories that they're telling themselves in their head, usually by researching from your own clients or target markets perspective. So actually ask your clients what their challenges are, and using their language, formulate it into a question that will hook them so that you can demonstrate that you know what their problems are. So that's how you would make it really compelling in the first instance. So I'll give you an example of that. Let me think. So you might ask, are you fed up of feeling tired?
Yeah.
Are you sick of having no time to yourself? Say they're mums. Are you sick of having no time to yourself and always putting yourself last? You know, asking the kinds of questions where they will identify with the problem. And then quite soon after hooking them, don't let it go on too far identifying them and getting those pain points out before you present yourself as the solution. But at the same time, don't go like all in and present every single thing you know about your product. So by compelling there, you need to address the exact answers to the questions, and you've already told them that you know what their problems are because you've used their language, and you've also pinpointed the exact thing that they're having trouble with. You want them to feel like you're almost reading their mind.
Yeah.
And so by using their language, you've got their interest, you've piqued their interest, and you're then presenting yourself as the solution, and then you go on to how you're going to do that. And the structure of a sales page is quite specific, or can be quite specific, and there are various templates out there. But from a language point of view, the word get is very, I wouldn't say compelling, but people want to know what they're going to get from you. And the word get is a very convincing one, because it indicates very strongly that they're like, that's what they'll receive.
Sure.
So that's a really great word to make sure you use in there. Also, you want to speak to them as you, always addressing the reader as you, because you have to remember that each person, even though from your perspective you're speaking to an audience of several hundred, several thousand people, or even if it's just your mum, we're imagining that we're speaking to several people, a group of people, but each person reading it is reading it from one person's perspective. They're reading it through one pair of eyes. So they, as an individual, don't want to be addressed as, hi, audience in general. They want to be addressed as you. So you're speaking directly to that person. So using the word you, using the word get, and also making a very strong call to action. So this isn't necessarily a language thing in terms of like a word that's really strong that you must use, but keeping sentences short, and especially instructions very clear, very precise, one idea per short sentence, is a really good way of making sure that there is no doubt as to what you want your reader to do.
Okay.
So those are my top things. Sorry, I covered quite a few different things in there.
No, that's great. Using the word get, making sure that your copy is really personal. You're not talking to the masses, you're talking to you as a specific person. And making sure that your sentences are quite short and punchy, where there's only one instruction there. I'm really guilty of I'm quite good at talking, from the heart, but I'm like, blah, 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 and this and this and this and this and this, and actually just making it much shorter and more concise is
Yeah.
more easily digestible.
And also feel free to break the rules. Like these days, when you're talking about conversational copy, you don't even have to make sentences whole sentences. Using bullet points, using headings that aren't like proper sentences that we were taught in school. It must have a noun, it must have a verb, it must have all this kind of thing. You can break those rules. And actually, I've got a lovely little free checklist that you can get from my website, which we'll talk about at the end, that helps you identify which rules you can break that you might think, oh, that's a bit naughty to do that. I learned to do it this way. Is it really okay to start a sentence with and? I give you permission to totally break certain rules. That means you can sound more conversational and natural, but not look unprofessional, like you don't know what you're talking about, because it's like language evolves really quickly, and the internet has done, well, in some ways no favors, but the internet has done a lot for that evolution, for sure.
Fantastic. Can you talk to us actually about the difference between copywriting and copy editing?
Yeah, I can. So copy is any piece of writing that has the intention of selling or marketing your services. So that's distinct from something that's informing people, like a blog post. You're wanting to position yourself on a blog post, but for argument's sake, let's just call all of the writing on your website the copy. Now, when you hire a copywriter, they are starting completely from scratch. They'll talk to you about your ideas, and they will come back with a piece of writing that has the purpose of the pages that we've just covered. So it could be an about page, it could be a sales page, it could be a services page or a home page, or it could be your whole website. So the copywriter writes it for you, usually by speaking to you or by getting a lot of information about your business. Copy editing is when you write the copy yourself. So you write the pages of your website yourself, and somebody looks at the tone of the language, whether it's audience appropriate, whether it's consistent, whether it's clear. There's a lot of assumption in some writing that you know what the audience is talking about, but you're the expert. So sometimes you have assumed knowledge where actually they don't know necessarily what you're talking about. So there might be some pointing out of gaps, pointing out of duplication. What else is it? Copy editing is so many things, but it's basically when you've written the copy yourself and you hand it to someone to polish and to make sure it really speaks to the audience and does the right thing. So it's basically, the distinction is who's actually doing the writing. And if you run your own business, usually you've got a really strong reason to be in that business and you know it inside out. You have a story behind why you ended up there. Perhaps you used to be in corporate and you left your job, perhaps after maternity leave or after you had your children and you wanted a change of pace, a change of direction, and something that suited your new lifestyle. So you've got a really strong reason to be in your own business and a real story behind that. So I always say writing your own copy is the way to go, because nobody can sound like you and really tell your story in the same way that you can. Having it copy edited means elevating it to a standard that is publishable and also gives you that confidence, like we were talking about earlier, that confidence to really put it out there and know that it's good, you know. All of the polish will be there too with the copy editing. So something I like to make the distinction as well between copy editing, which is all the really subjective, languagey stuff, and proofing, which is the grammar and the word order and that kind of thing. But they sort of overlap. So punctuation is just a black and white kind of no arguments about that kind of thing. But the copy editing is really the step above just making sure all the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted. It's making sure that it really sounds good and flows and does its job.
Fantastic. That is, I think it's really helpful actually. And I think for my audience who perhaps do need to work on their confidence in terms of their writing, the best way for you to do that is just to start writing. It's just to start putting yourself out there and imagine sharing your story as if you were talking to your best friend. And
that's a brilliant technique. I love that one. Just pretend you're telling somebody over a coffee, you know, what you're about to launch or anything like that, and even record yourself having a chat and get it transcribed and then tidy it up and edit it down yourself or whatever.
Brilliant. That is a brilliant idea actually. Record yourself, and you don't even need to have the person opposite you, but record it as if you were telling your best friend or your best business buddy what your new idea is, and capture the excitement. So you've got it there, and then you can go to somewhere like fiverr.com and get it transcribed for you, so you've all got it written out, and then you can polish it. Or if you want to invest, you know, you can go to somebody like Kris and get them to tidy it up for you. But I think that that's the biggest deal, isn't it? When you're writing, so many people, and it's that kind of, I call it corporate mentality, but it's just that general cultural thing of feeling a little bit uneasy about standing out, feeling a little bit uneasy about letting the facade down. But that's, you know, you can talk about words and tactics, but actually just when you are able to talk like you talk to your best mate, that's when people get it. That's when people are like, oh, she's really like me. Okay, I want to work with her because.
Yeah. And when I was saying earlier about using your client's exact language when you're answering their problems, that's when that's when bells start to ring in people's heads. Just, oh, I've heard this before. Like, she's right inside my head. Speak like you would, or write like you would speak. Some people advocate writing like you talk, and some people completely don't. And the people who don't are not made for the internet, because that's the kind of thing that we like to read. Think about what you like to read online, and it's not. I'm going to hazard again. It's unlikely to be the very journalistic style, the very reporting style. I doubt you read anything that is a great big chunk of text, a great long paragraph of text. If you're anything like me, you'll click straight off a website that has long sentences and is really dense and hard to penetrate really easily. You want to be able to absorb it in small digestible pieces. We don't have these attention spans that we're used to when we, like, say, reading a textbook. When you have to study, that's a completely different environment, and the world just isn't, you know, we're just not used to digesting really complex material online. It's not the arena for it. Sure, like, there are other arenas for much more complex information, but that's not how we read online, and it's not how you want to speak online. So if you're in the habit of writing like you were taught to at school, or like feeling like you are breaking rules that you were taught, then really encourage you to get away from feeling like you're doing it wrong, because they're almost, I mean, there is stuff that looks a bit shoddy, and, you know, I don't mean like talk in general text speak and Yeah, exactly. Make it really base, but at the same
I don't
time,
want you lolling in your copy.
and
But
don't be shouting at people. But yeah, like definitely need to chill out about all the rules. It's just not necessary to be so uptight and be so ever so about your writing. And on that note, it's okay to swear. I mean, it kind of depends on your audience as to whether they can gel with it.
yeah,
But I always recommend using profanity in your writing as much as you would in real life, because that matches, that's authentic, that's real. I've just tweaked my about page today to give people a heads up that I swear. So I get it in there nice and early. And you know, if you don't like that style, you're not for me, because I don't want to attract clients who
feel offended by you.
Exactly.
That wouldn't be good.
If you don't like swearing, you can hire a different editor, and I'm totally cool by that. But we're probably not going to gel. And likewise for the people watching, if I doubt your target audience is just any and all new mums or any and all people getting pregnant. Like, you're probably more niche than that, and probably more inclined to want to attract certain clients rather than others. And the more you can be yourself, the more you can get that across in your writing, the better.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I just want to draw something out that you said earlier on, which I think will be really helpful, just about, particularly on that homepage when people first land, having a big block of text is probably the biggest turn off that you can get. And so really it's right from the get-go, short, actionable points, exactly like you said earlier on, that encourage people to click through to find out more. So if your site has just loads of information on that homepage, just pare it down. Just pare it down, take it out.
Yeah, definitely. Make things the lowest common denominator and really digestible and simple. I mean, don't patronize people, obviously, but you know, give them one obvious thing to do at once. Don't say, download my thing, and also, do you want to work with me? And also, like, check out my blog. They're not going to know what to do, so they're not going to do anything. It's particularly important on the homepage because that's the first impression you're creating. You want it to be instantly recognizable what you do. So few words, but really powerful words. Really try to nail exactly what you do in a nutshell. And that doesn't necessarily mean having a flashy tagline or something like that. Actually, sometimes the more simple words can work a lot better than like having something super unique. But definitely getting to the point and not trying to give them all the information at once. It's definitely not about telling them everything you know on the first impression. That, you know, it's a bit like dating. You want to like have a little bit of, you know, mystery. They've got something to get to know, you know, that's part of the whole dance, isn't it?
Just kiss them on the cheek, no tongues on the hand. Basically, that's what we're saying.
That's what I'm saying. Don't give it all away up front.
Kris, I know you've got yourself some amazing resources to help people cheat their way through creating their own copy. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Sure, yeah. So I mentioned it earlier. I have a little free checklist that you can download on my website, krisemery.com. And it's called How to Cheat at Writing, but it basically, in a nutshell, identifies the exact places where you can break the rules that you learn at school, and it also tells you which ones not to break. It tells you exactly how to do that and how to look out for things in your writing that are turning people off, and what can be done to make it more effective.
Brilliant.
So it's just like, I think it's like a 10-page cheat sheet, kind of explains a little bit behind why, but I promise it's not too geeky. I've tried to keep the grammar geek, on the down low, because I'm not really that geeky. And we were talking earlier about, being very chatty and finding it difficult to rein it in. I'm one of those kind of people who is very much I've said it before I even know I think it kind of thing. So yeah, it's tough to keep things succinct sometimes, but it'll tell you exactly how to translate your spoken style into a writing style that doesn't fit into that very conforming school rule kind of way of writing. It's something that's much more applicable to the way we write online.
Perfect. Oh, well, thank you so much for joining us today. I think that there's loads of really helpful, useful content. And if you have created some copy and feel that you would love to have it polished up by the amazing Kris, then just pop over to her website, krisemery.com, and fill out one of your application forms, and I'm sure that Kris would be really happy to talk to you to see if she can help.
So good, definitely. And I'm also all over social media, you can't miss me. So if you have questions that you'd like me to answer on my blog or anything like that, feel free to give me a shout, because you won't be the only one who's wondering how to tackle something. So yeah, get in touch.
Perfect. All right, lovely. Thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you.
Sunny yours.
Thanks very much.
Take care.
Thanks for having me. Bye.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.